What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. So it's been 5 months since the inception of Link Summoning per Master Rule 4 in the TCG. So I thought it'd be interesting to do a little video kind of looking back and reflecting on some of the notions that I had when it came to Link Summoning before we had the opportunity to really experiment with the mechanic itself and kind of analyze the aspects as to where I was right and where I was wrong in some of the claims that I made, because I was a very strong opponent when it came to Link Summoning as a whole, and I made some very distinctively bold claims as to how I thought it was going to have an impact on the game itself. So I thought this would be interesting to kind of see where I was right, where I was wrong, and kind of where we can look at the future because of what we've been seeing in Japan, as well as knowing what we know now. So starting off with the aspects where I was right. One of the biggest claims that I made, and this was probably the biggest reason that I was very much so against Link Summoning, was the fact that it does prohibit certain decks from being able to play in the way that they're meant to be played. Now, this was generally focused towards a deck like Burning Abyss, for instance. Burning Abyss was heavily restricted by the Link Summoning mechanic per the fact that because of all the Burning Abyss monsters have the effect that they destroy themselves if you don't control Burning Abyss monster, that really prohibits the deck in tandem with the fact they're only allowed one monster in the extra monster zone to really go off. So what does this mean? Well, this means you can't summon multiple Dantes unless one is resurrected by Seer, or you can't really just go off in the same way you used to with Burning Abyss because of the way Master Rule 4 and Link Summoning as a whole really just prohibited the deck from doing what it used to do in the past. And the same thing goes for a wide variety of other decks as well. You can also take a deck like Pendulum Magician. Pendulum Magician, or really any pendulum-based deck for that matter, are really restricted by the Link Summoning mechanic because before you were able to just shit out every monster in your extra monster zone onto the field, basically giving yourself a free soul charge, aka return from the different dimension type of effect every single turn, which arguably was a little bit imbalanced. So I mean, I guess we could be grateful from the perspective that if it weren't for Link Summoning, we'd still be dealing with shit like that. So now with Link Summoning and Master Rule 4, you're only allowed to special summon monsters from your extra monster zone from the extra deck to the extra monster zone. So that makes it so that unless you have a Link monster already on the field, you're going to basically be limited to one pendulum summon monster from the extra deck more often than not. So it's kind of interesting to see how these decks in particular were kind of the biggest ones that were hit in this way. And there's a plethora of other decks as well that were really restricted because of Link Summoning in this fashion if you really go down into it. But what's really interesting, and this is where we're going to go to one of the aspects where I'm wrong, because it's on the same notion, because even though these decks are so heavily restricted in comparison, these are still some of the strongest decks of the current format. I mean, Pendulum Magician has been an absolute dominating force and is only actually going to get better with the introduction of some Link monsters we're going to be getting here soon in the future out of Extreme Force, aka Heavy Metal Foes Electromite. Same thing goes for Burning Abyss. Burning Abyss has been able to top numerous events even under the overbearing restrictions of Master Rule 4 and Link Summoning, and it's still able to win and do well at events. Now, the thing that's so absolutely crazy about that is the fact that we're going to be getting these extra Link monsters thanks in part to cards that are coming from the Link Vrains pack in Japan, but we're going to be receiving via other methods here in the TCG. So we're going to be getting cards like Heavy Metal Foes Electromite, like Cherubini, the Burning Abyss Link monster, which means that even though these decks are under these restrictions, they're still going to be doing well, if not become better, after these decks receive their very own generic Link monster support that actually directly supports their archetype, which that to me is just insane, because that is one of the biggest aspects where I was wrong. I really felt that these decks were not going to have much of a chance due to the restrictions, but yet here we are. Pendulum Magician is still one of the top contenders of the current format and will continue to be so probably for the next couple months unless something really drastic happens on the ban list. And the same thing goes for Burning Abyss, which still is tearing shit up in 2017 and probably will continue to do so in 2018 as well. Now, another aspect where I was right is one of the claims I made is that people are straying away from the Link summoning mechanic in general, and that is still very much holding true. We just talked about Pendulum Magicians. Pendulum Magicians very rarely take advantage of the Link summoning mechanic just because of the way the deck operates until we get Heavy Metal Foes Electromite, of course, but for the time being, what are you really summoning out of the extra deck in Pendulum Magicians? You're summoning cards like Omega, you're summoning cards like Baguska, maybe Time Star Magician, maybe some of the Supreme Kings, things like that. You're really never needing to take advantage of the Link summoning mechanic because your deck really doesn't need it in terms of what the deck is able to do. Same thing goes for a deck like Trickstars. Trickstar is one of the main archetypes of the Vrains era, and while it does utilize Link summoning, how often are you really taking advantage of the Link summoning in a deck like Trickstar? Not really too often outside of the, teching in cards like Scapegoat and things like that, just because you need to give the deck a little bit of extra oomph. So it's really interesting to see this because that's one of the most interesting things, because you've still got plenty of other decks that don't really need to take advantage of the Link summoning mechanic or aren't necessarily reliant on that Link summoning mechanic as a whole. But then on the other hand, I'm also completely wrong in this aspect as well, because as we've seen in the OCG, people are actually really flocking to the Link summoning mechanic and trying to take advantage of how you can really capitalize on the Link summoning mechanic itself. That's why a deck like Plant Link or Plant FTK is able to pretty much be a deck, is because people really embrace the Link summoning mechanic, really took advantage of some of the things that these overpowered Link monsters, especially the ones in the Link Vrains pack, are capable of doing, and they're able to make a deck that's very reminiscent and paying homage to a deck like Plant Synchro way back in the day, but it's able to almost take on a new form and able to compete in the current meta with some of these other just incredibly powerful contenders. Now, I think the biggest aspect of where I was wrong when it came to Link summoning as a whole was the fact that Link summoning will slow down the game. I'm not the only one that made this claim, but I was one of the biggest, proponents of saying that it would slow down the game and kind of take away from the identity of Yu-Gi-Oh! As a whole, and I couldn't have been more completely wrong in that aspect, because, yeah, sure, Link summoning does take away some of the potential of some decks, as I mentioned earlier, but at the same time, it didn't slow down Yu-Gi-Oh! In the way that I thought it would. Now, the biggest example of this is a deck like Spiral, and to be fair, 5 months ago, I did not know that a card like Spiral Double Helix was going to exist. But there's so many other instances of this as well. There's cards like Firewall Dragon. Firewall Dragon's currently limited in the OCG because it basically, in multiples, just helps enable so many degenerate loops that people were just utterly sick of it and just wanted to see the card go to 1, and Japan responded appropriately. Same thing goes back to Plant FTK or the Plant Link deck. This is another deck where, again, it's able to kill your opponent on turn 1 and play through several hand traps, and here I was thinking that Link summoning was really going to slow down the game. That was something where I was just completely wrong, and I wholeheartedly admit it, because the way I thought Yu-Gi-Oh! Was going to be shifting in that direction 5 months ago, I mean, if you think about it, before we knew all this, before we were going to be getting all of these generic archetype-specific Link monsters out of the Link Vrains pack, before we got cards like Spiral Double Helix, before we had all the information that we knew now, you kind of have to think back then having that mentality. I think a lot more people conformed to that mentality because of where the game was at the time. But it's really cool to see that Links are thriving in a very positive way, and even though I was wrong in this respect, I'm actually kind of happy that I was wrong, because, yeah, sure, Spiral was a little bit of a misstep and kind of a disaster because it was a tier 0 deck / format, but at the same time, I think it's cool to see that that's really what the potential that Link monsters have. It's cool to see that there's so many different combos that you can do, and it really adds this really unique and distinctive element to the game that, even though I was apprehensive and very skeptical of at first, it's really cool to see that not only other people are embracing it, but that I've come around and embraced it myself. But guys, those are just my preconceived notions about Link summoning in Master Rule 4 over the past 5 months, but I'm really curious to hear what you guys think down in the comments below, and what other notions you might have had going into this new era of Yu-Gi-Oh! If you want to call it that, and what you think where we are now 5 months later. I'd really love to hear your thoughts because going into 2018, I thought this would be a nice way to wrap up, you know, kind of the videos for the year, and I think it'd be cool to see what other things we, you know, if we're at this point now, where are we going to be another 5 months from now? Where are we going to be at the end of 2018? I'm really curious to hear what you guys have to think. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video insightful, consider backing me on Patreon, because just by pledging only $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.